What if you could paint a human face? I know it seems impossible, but what if you could? What if you could look at a face and there were 5 things that you could do that would make people go, oh, I get it. I know what that is. I know who that is. Well, we have an expert on today, Bill Schneider. William A. Schneider is one of the top artists and one of the great portrait artists of our time. Welcome back.
Hi, glad to be here.
So what is it about these 5 things? What are the 5 things?
The 5 things are the 5 shadow shapes that define a human face. And we recognize this. You can recognize somebody from 2 blocks away. You don't see any details, but you recognize that it's a person by the 5 shadow shapes in their face. And
Okay.
the 5 shapes, I'm going to draw them for you, but they are the eye sockets, under the nose, under the upper lip, under the lower lip, and then under the chin. And I'll put them in right now.
Okay.
So if we see this, their eye sockets, there's a nose under here, there's the shadow under the upper lip, the shadow under the lower lip, and a shadow under the chin. We recognize that as a human face in normal light. And by normal light, I mean descending light. And so the good news is that if we put those shadow shapes in, those 5 key shapes, we can do it really quickly.
Okay. And then everything else comes together after that.
Yeah. I mean, you saw how fast I did this, and this is just, with a marker.
All right. So you're going to show us how to do a portrait today?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Well, let's do it. Let's get the show officially started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose.
We have a rock star on today. His name is Bill Schneider, and he is an expert at painting faces and figures and portraits. And you're going to want to learn from him today. And he's going to talk about the 5 shapes that define a face. We're going to use this as a reference today. And so we'll have it pulled up for him. Bill Schneider, let's take it away.
Okay. I thought that I had already taken it away, but here's my quick demo of the 5 shadow shapes that define a human face. And it's the eye sockets under the nose, under the upper lip, under the lower lip, and under the chin. And if we see that, we recognize that as a face without anything else there. And the good news is that we can put these in really quickly.
All right.
And so the key to creating the illusion of a 3-dimensional face, first of all, is value. I did this with a black marker, but they don't have to be that dark. But value is the first tool that we have to define 3-dimensionality, to define a face in space. But there's a second tool, and that is temperature. The shadows always not only have a value, but they have a color temperature. And what I mean by that is they're either warm, lean to the warm side, or lean to the cool side. And the key to that is the first question that every artist should ask themselves. And that is, what is the temperature of the light? And that is crucial. If you don't know the answer to that, you shouldn't keep going. So here, I am under north light in my studio, and that north light is cool because there's there's no sun, it's facing the blue of the sky, and so there's a lot of blue light rays in that. Why is that important? Because if you have a cool light, it's cool because there's a predominance of blue rays, green, purple, things on the cool side of the color wheel. If you block those blue rays, you're left with something that's less blue, meaning it's going to be warmer. So cool light generates warmer shadows. And it's not blue and orange, but it's warmer, cooler. So to do a portrait, the first thing that I do is ask myself, what is the temperature of the light? And so then I will start to set up the face, and I'm going to just show you how I tone the support. And the way I'll do it is I often just start with the temperature of the light.
Okay, so you're painting in pastel.
Yeah, I'm painting in pastel, and I'm putting something that's going to sort of replicate the cool temperature of the light. And you might be looking at that and saying, well, yeah, that's crazy. People are not blue. That's
Some
true.
people are. I've been really blue sometimes, but I usually get over it.
Yeah, but I can start to put in more of the local color. And by the local color, I mean the actual skin tones. But it's got that blue in it. It's maybe a little too orangey. I see.
Now, what we're going to learn today could really apply to all kinds of painting because
Yes.
of these 5 shapes.
Right. It's, when I was in art school, we would have nice summer days out, and I'd say to my painting instructor, why don't we go outside and do a landscape? And he'd say, if you can paint a head, you can paint anything. And I found that to really be true. And the reason that it's true is because as humans, we all recognize other people, and we will notice little tiny errors that you might not notice if you're doing a landscape or a still life. If you're painting a landscape and there's a tree, and you move it over 20 feet in your painting. So, sorry, I've got a phone on in the background here. Let me get rid of that thing.
Okay. Our guest today is Bill Schneider, and we're learning about the 5 shapes that you need to paint a portrait. Bill's going to be right back. Bill will be part of Pastel Live. He's going to be on a forum that we're doing with some top artists. That's coming up in September. Okay, he's back.
So I put in some of the local colors, but I don't want to lose that temperature of that light. And I'm using the heel of my hand to sort of blend everything in. So the pastel layer here is very, very thin. Most of the pastel dust is ending up in my dust trough down here. But once I have that, then when I start to put in the dark shapes, it's immediately going to convey 3-dimensionality. It's immediately going to start looking like a face. And so that's almost all what I would do. There's a little bit of greenish tone near the bottom. Typically there are 3 bands of color on a face. We tend to be sort of creamier towards the top, pinker towards the middle, and then there's a little bit of a greenish tone near the bottom.
Now, does that change with male, female because of a beard line?
With a beard on a male, it will be gray-green because we see the beard stubble showing through. But females tend to be that way too. And
Tell us the 3 bands again.
Sort of a creamier color at the top, a redder color across the middle, and then a greener tone slightly. And it's very, very slight. You can see how almost imperceptible that is.
Yep.
If I hadn't mentioned it, you might not have even noticed it. So then, and by the way, what I'm using for my reference, I'm using a black and white photo, but I got the colors from this painting that I had done. So I'm borrowing these flesh tones.
Right.
And so that's where
And did you do that originally from life?
that one, actually, we're 2 generations borrowed. I did this one as a demo from a photo, and then I borrowed the colors from yet another painting. As artists, we're in charge of quality control. So we get to manipulate what happens on our canvas.
Right.
When it's all done, people see what's on the canvas. You know, if you go to some of the great museums of the world and see, like go to the 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗺 and see, or the Hermitage or wherever it is, the 𝗙𝗰𝗵𝗵 painting of the boat haulers on the Volga.
Yeah.
He didn't have all of these people standing out there. He did a bunch of studies and then assembled it in his studio. And so that is often what artists do, when, especially if they're creating complex compositions. So as artists, we get to control what happens here. And if we don't like the way it looks on our canvas or on our support, we don't have to paint it that way. We can paint it so that it looks the way we want it to look. I routinely adjust models that I paint from life. I will give them more makeup or less makeup, change their hair, whatever.
I'm going to pull up the image that Bill just referenced on the Volga by 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗺. You can see there's a lot of different figures, and he did multiple studies for those. I've seen the studies actually for those because they did a big 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗺 show the last time I was in Russia.
Wow.
The biggest 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗺 show ever put together to celebrate, I think, the 150th death date or something like that.
Oh, you're lucky that you got to see that.
I am lucky.
Yeah, what a life you lead.
I do.
All these wonderful museums and take all your friends with you. It's very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move my easel into view here. And so here's my reference, the black and white reference. And I did the part that takes a lot of time, and that is measuring and laying out where the features are. Because this was not, in a half an hour
So
demo.
can you tell us how you measure, what you're thinking of when you're trying to figure out placement?
Yes, I usually start with a center line, and I figure out, I decide how big the head is going to be. Then I figure out the distance between the eyes, corner of the eyes to the chin compared to the corner of the eyes to the top of the head, that relationship, because it's close to 50-50. Then I find the eyebrows. That's sort of the tough part, but I will measure this distance and compare it to this. Then I measure from top of eyebrows to bottom of nose, compared to bottom of nose to chin, and then bottom of nose to the bottom of the lower lip, compared to bottom of lower lip to the chin. Again, I'm dividing things mostly in half. That's the way they taught me at the American Academy. And
Which is now gone.
yes, that's
It's
terrible.
awful. It's just awful.
It is. And if you think of all of the great artists that came out of there, Dan Gerhardt's, Rose Franson, Mel Delatorre, Richard Schmid, and now the school's gone.
I know. People have
Very
been contacting me, asking me to put money in and save it.
sad.
I figured that's your job.
Yeah, well, yeah, they never contacted the alums to ask for money. Probably because most artists don't have a lot of money. But in any case, I laid out that drawing first. The 5 darks I can put in really quickly.
All right. And you're going to make those darks warmer.
Yes, because the light is cool and I set up the temperature of the skin. Even though it's kind of an orangey color, it's a cool orangey. It's got all that blue in it.
All right.
Which is what the light had. And so as soon as I put the warmer color, and I'm going to pick this pastel which is
Okay.
kind of a warm brownish, violety brown. But watch how fast I can block these 5 darks in. This is an area that you want to do relatively quickly. And you also want to get all 5 darks in because it won't read as 3-dimensional until you do that. If you just work on the eyes, it's not going to look right. So I'm going to put in what I'm seeing on the reference, and I'm doing it very quickly, and I'm softening these edges as I go. And I'm going to not put in the dark that's on the side of the nose right away. And the reason for that is sometimes that side of the nose is in shadow. Most of the time it is not. And so I don't want to get in the habit of painting that dark side of the nose. Here's the kiss of death. To put outlines on the side of the nose, I see that from students all the time. And it's because the universal nose symbol is a triangle with 2 dark spots on the bottom. And so we want to keep your painting out of symbol land and into shapes. We want to paint shapes, not things. And things are anything with a name. So if we have eyes, that has a name. It also has a symbol, a visual symbol. Nose has a name and a visual symbol. But you can see that just putting that in quickly gave the illusion of 3-dimensionality. And if I sort of complete this by putting what's around it, I'm going to put a dark for this hair. I think I'm going to use a different dark. If I put the dark for the hair in, I normally would have put my darkest dark in right at the beginning, just so I'd know how dark to make these shadows. Because of the camera placement, I'm sort of drawing across my body, which is not the most comfortable drawing position.
Well, thank you for making the sacrifice.
Oh, it was a tragic sacrifice, let me tell you. See, that starts to get the portrait going without much else in there, and that was quick. The drawing took time because you have to measure, and there's no way to speed up that measurement. But if I then put some colors outside so that I'm not looking at the light of the support, I can do that pretty quickly too. And just with that short amount of work, it's created sort of the effect that I was hunting for, which is the illusion of 3-dimensionality. But obviously that's far from being a completed portrait. So, but once I've got that structure in, then I can sort of continue playing with it and refining it. So in that shadow shape, you know, there's some darks where the eyelashes are. And by the way, you pastelists that are watching this, notice that I'm using a 2-inch or 1.5 inch stick of pastel, and I'm using the side of it. It's very it's a very clunky instrument. It's like in the one of the recent Bond movies, James Bond, where M says to Bond, "You're a blunt instrument." But we want a blunt instrument because we don't want this to get too refined too early. You know, the biggest danger for particularly beginning artists is you tend to make everything too hard. And I did it when I started out. And I knew that I didn't want to lose the drawing, so I would make those edges just razor sharp. And as a result, it looked very harsh. See, I can paint into this. I've gotten some of the dark areas into the light of the face, and it's making it look kind of muddy. By the way, muddy color is always, without exception, an inappropriate temperature. So if you get some of the dark value and temperature into the area that's supposed to be light, it's going to look muddy. But I can kind of wipe that out, and I'm going to come over it again at the end with more flesh color. So you know, I can keep puttering around with this thing, but I'm going to try to get it to a reasonable level and then quit, given that we don't have all day to sit and watch me do a demo.
Well, people want to see full demos. Bill has a whole series of videos available from painttube.tv. Wow, I think you have more videos than anybody we've ever done. Let's see here. We have composition secrets for figure painting. We have pastel painting secrets. We have expressive oil painters, portraits. We have heads and hands. We have 𝗏𝗏𝘁𝗵's painting secrets. We have teaching the limited palette techniques of Zorn. Princess, Inner Flame, and Design Secrets of the Masters. How'd you get so many?
You kept inviting me to make, because I view the world of art as very modular. And so when I'm teaching people, I try to teach modules. And so what I mean by that is there's 5 things that we need to learn as artists. And they are shape, which is the drawing, value, which we talked a little bit about here, color temperature, edge, and design. Those are sort of the 5 main buckets of information. And so the videos work on each of those different buckets as a separate item. Musicians, I'm also a musician. And so musicians tend to learn things in modules. Visual artists try to do everything at once. You're going to learn about edges by doing an entire painting that has edges in it. And the problem is, of course, that halfway through the painting, you forget about the edges that you were working on. So a musician would have, if a musician was doing visual art, they would have edge exercises and they would work on the edges. And they would have drawing exercises and they would work on the drawings. And so that's what I try to do in the videos, is break it up into manageable pieces. So once I got the 5 darks in, then I come back and start adjusting them. So I wanted to push that temperature difference. So now I'm getting an even warmer color and putting that in. And this is true for landscape painters as well. If you want to make something really go in, like underneath a tree or under a bush, or a deep recess is virtually always hot compared to what's around it. Richard Schmid, in his great book, 𝗪𝗂𝗄, said that, you know, cool light generates warm shadows, warm light generates cool shadows. However, the deepest recesses are virtually always hot. And he said in his book that he once in his life, he saw a deep dark that was cool, but he said he was standing on the edge of a glacier looking into a crevasse. I personally have never seen a deep dark that's anything other than warm. The deepest recesses, regardless of the temperature of the light. And why that is, I'm not quite sure, but I know it's true. So by making this a little bit warmer, it's giving more of that effect. There's some shadows over here. There's a little bit of shadow under the...
If you tuned in late, our guest today is William Schneider. Bill is teaching us the 5 forms and how do we make a portrait from those 5 forms.
And the 5 forms are the 5 darks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They define the human head in normal, that is descending light. Now notice how sloppy this is. And by sloppy, I mean the edges are ill-defined and it just sort of bleeds into what's around it. We can always tighten things up. That's easy to do. But to get something looser is devilishly difficult. And so if you start out relatively loosely, you're in better shape. So once I had it to this point, then I would just start refining things. And I might put the highlights in the hair here. Oops. I'm just putting some cool lights where this is catching the descending light. It looks really sloppy so far, but the longer I work on this, the more it's going to tighten up and the more it's going to look like what's in front of me. So with these eyes, I'm going to give her brown eyes. She looks like she would have brown eyes. And by the way, where did I get this reference? I asked Midjourney AI to create a female model, and it gave me a bunch of different ones, and I kept refining it. So this is an artificial human.
Aren't we all, really?
Yes, we are.
The journey is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But you got to count fingers. Sometimes they add extra fingers.
Yes, extra fingers or not enough fingers, or, you know, it still needs work on the nuance, but it's new. So I'm going to work on one eye just to refine this a little bit so that you guys know that I can actually paint.
Okay. I think we know that.
So the deepest dark is generally the pupil.
So you make that warm?
I'm making it warm, and it's a warm, it's almost a black, but it's a deep, warm color. Now, if she's got brown eyes, the brown eyes tend to have orangey, reddish colors in them, particularly where the light comes through. The descending light is coming in this way, so it's hitting the glassy, wet cornea, and some of it's going to bounce straight back, and that creates a highlight. But some of it goes through the cornea and ends up on the iris itself, and that catches the actual color of the iris. So I'm going to give sort of a warmer orangey color down there. And in fact, I'm going to push it a little bit and make it even more orangey. I wanted that brown color in as a base, but then when I take this orange and put it in, and you might be saying, that looks like a really sloppy eye. And yes, it is, but.
She looks like she's bruised.
Yeah, well, we'll unbruise her. A lot of times, the best and easiest way to paint something is to paint the negative shapes around it. So if I take a gray for the so-called white of the eye,
Yeah.
and I always call it that because my life drawing teacher, 𝗞𝗶𝗆𝗆 used to call it the so-called white of the eye. He never called it the white of the eye. It was always the so-called white of the eye.
Yeah.
And he did that to teach us that the light of the eye is far from white. Problem is, we as humans have language, and the language is an abstraction, and it makes it easy to deal with information quickly because it simplifies so much of it. But as artists, we have to look and see the way we saw things when we were infants, and that is see just shapes of color and value and paint those shapes. So I'm sneaking up on the so-called white of the eye. I'm getting it lighter and lighter as I go, because I would rather err on the side of it being too dark. So then I can come back in and restate the eyelashes. And the tear bag underneath the eye is also a shadow shape. It's not as dark maybe as some of the other shadow shapes up in here, but it is true shadow. It's part of that, the big 5 dark shadow shape. So I want to make sure I catch that. And I'm going to put a highlight in, and you'll see how rapidly. And I'm going to move the highlight. No, I'm not. I'm going to put it where it is. I'm going to put it on the side. And normally, it's not a dot. First of all, with a highlight, it's not white, and it's not a dot. Usually, it has some shape to it, because the highlight is a reflection of the light source. And my light source up there is a rectangular window. And so when it reflects in an eye, it's going to be more of a line. And if there's that much light there, then there's also some light on the top of the eyelid. And there's some light bleeding out into here. And there's typically light, there's a light area right in the corner of the eye. It tends to be lighter than the flesh around it. And it's also more of the temperature of the light. So if the light is cool, which is what we have here, that highlight in the corner is going to be cooler too. The highlight that's by the eye. So then, see that's looking more like an eye, right? When I work in pastel, my primary tool is my finger. And I learned that from Harley Brown. Harley was my pastel teacher, and he was teaching pastel years before the explosion in pastel artists.
We have an event coming up with Harley Brown. I talked to him the other day, and we're going to be doing something with him soon online. So it's exciting.
Good. I think I'm part of that too. We're doing
No, that's what you're talking about is on Pastel Live. This is something completely different.
Oh, really?
But, yeah, he's going to, I asked him, what are the essential truths that he's discovered in 70 years of painting, and he's going to reveal those essential truths.
Wow. And he has a lot to reveal.
Yeah.
Harley, like I said, I studied with him, and that's where I learned my pastel technique. He,
do you do oil or watercolor?
Yes, I do oil. I have done watercolor. I would not call myself a watercolorist. Watercolor is too hard. It's too unforgiving. Pastel, you can keep working on and refining and whip it into shape. Same thing with oil. Watercolor, if you make a mistake and you let an edge harden, you cannot get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so, too much work.
Yeah, I'm experimenting with that. I've been doing watercolor lately.
Have you?
Yeah.
Good for you. I took watercolor lessons. I saw an exhibition of Zorn in San Francisco, and there were paintings that I had thought were oil paintings for years. I have a wonderful Zorn book, but it's published in Swedish, which I do not speak. And so I didn't know what the text was saying. I just was looking at the pictures, basically. And did not realize that some of these paintings that I thought were oil paintings were actually watercolors.
Well, that's exactly what I thought till I went to the Zorn Museum last year. And wow, I mean, these watercolors blew me away.
Oh, he was amazing. He was a famous watercolorist long before he did his first oil painting.
Yep.
How are we doing time-wise?
Well, we're doing okay. You've probably got about 15 minutes left.
Okay, good.
If you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. We'd love to hear them. And if you love what you're seeing, make sure to give a thumbs up or an applause.
I'm putting on a new glove because I started eating a hole through the other vinyl glove. I work on sanded surfaces. If you're a pastelist, once you go to sanded, you will never go back because it holds so much more pastel. But it's hard on the hands. So I use these vinyl food service gloves, and they allow me to blend.
Without taking your fingerprints off.
Exactly. I don't want to be like, what
You
was
could
it?
become a cat burglar though.
Yeah, well. So now I'm just going to show you how you can come in around the outside and kind of clean things up by painting the negative space. Can
you explain what negative space is?
The negative space is space around a thing. So that's not very helpful. But like when I did the eye, instead of trying to meticulously paint the shape of the iris itself, I painted that iris very sloppily, and then I carved into it by painting what we call the negative shape. And the negative shape is the space on the side. Landscape painters routinely do this for like branches in a tree. They'll do the mass of the tree, and then they'll come in with some of the sky color to carve out the space around a limb. And it's much easier to get more of these refined shapes by painting what's around it rather than trying to just work on the shape that's there. Is that clear?
Yep.
Clear as
Yep,
mud?
I think so.
Good. There's a little bit of a reflection on the top of that lower lid. So I can put that in. And I could, keep going on this. This is kind of the fun part. It's all the fun part, but particularly, carving in and refining these shapes. As the further it goes, the more it starts to look like your subject and the more fun it is, for me at least. I'm going to give her a little more pinkish color. We tend to be, as I said in the beginning, pinker across kind of here. There's more blood vessels and capillaries. We evolved to be able to survive in the cold, meaning we've got a lot of blood vessels to bring blood to things that stick out, like noses and ears. So they tend to be a little pinker there. Flesh is translucent. If they're doing an autopsy on flesh, if you are like I am, of Nordic descent, and you went out in the sun a lot when you were a little kid, you discover in your trips to the dermatologist that they need to take off some of the sun damage. I'm going again in a couple of days to have them carve off a growth on my arm. But in any case, the skin is translucent, so light will shine through it, so you see what's underneath it, which is probably why the bone is closer to the forehead. So you're kind of seeing some of that ivory color of the bone showing through, and there are more capillaries in here, so you're seeing some of that pinker color. And why it's greenish down here, I'm not quite sure, but I just know that it tends to be. It's probably because the greener color is a modulation between the shadow, the warm shadow, and the cool light. And you're getting something that's sort of partway distant in terms of both temperature and value. So for example, I put some of the shadow shapes in here, but I can add sort of this cooler shadow. This is warmer than this, I think. Temperature is always relative. You know, you'd say, is that a cool color or a warm color? And the answer is, compared to what? This is definitely cooler than this, right?
Yeah.
But it's warmer than this.
Right.
And this was the color that I used for the light. So in this lexicon, this halftone-ish transitory color is partway between. So there are no such things as a cool color and a warm color. It's always in relation to something else. But I have observed that on the edges of shadows, you may have a really warm shadow, but then the edges, as it starts to roll into the light, starts to pick up the temperature of the light. I wanted to get that one eye in just so you could have a sense of
Yeah. Thank
what
you.
it looks like when it's more developed. Now, one thing I'm going to add, there's this deep crease above the eyelid, and that's one of those deep recesses that tends to be hotter.
You need your pastel sharpener.
Nah, there. I'll fix that. See, pastel is so forgiving. So I got that warm dark in the wrong spot.
Hope you guys are enjoying this. Our guest today is Bill Schneider, and we're talking about the 5 shadows of the face, and then he's kind of taking the portrait to the next level.
So I can take that off pretty easily. So I'm just using this stump to kind of remove the mark that was in the wrong spot. And then I'm going to soften the edge on this one. And then I can come back in and put the highlight back where I put that wrong mark. Easy peasy, as my granddaughter would say.
You make it look easy.
Well, you know what? The more you learn, the easier it becomes. You realize that the things, part of what makes art difficult is that we try to do things that the hard way. And then after we've done it the hard way enough times, we learn the easy way. For example, what I talked about, using the negative shapes. And so you learn the little tricks that make it easier. So it's painting is much easier for me now than it was when I started, because I didn't know the little tricks. And it's helpful if you remember that there are 5 buckets of information: shape, value, color, temperature, edge, and design. And if you put all your information mentally in one of those 5 buckets, it's easier to hang on to it. So if I'm having trouble with a painting, it's because the shapes are wrong. In other words, I've got a color in an area that it doesn't belong in, or it goes too far, or it's not the right angle. So that's a shape issue. So once I resolve the shape issues, well, then is it dark enough or light enough? Is it too warm, too cool? Too sharp, too soft? These are paired questions that follow those 5 buckets of information.
So we're going to wrap in about 3 minutes, Bill.
Okay, so I don't have time to complete everything, but I'm at least going to give her a bottom lip. Sort of. And there's probably a little warmer color right in the middle. And there would be a highlight on that lip. And there is typically a highlight on the nose. The highlights are where the form changes direction. And so there's typically one up here on the bridge of the nose and one at the tip of the nose. And there's typically highlights there.
Well, this has been very helpful. You guys like it, make sure to give him a applause, thumbs up, a heart, something.
And if you want to see a full demo, as Eric said, it's, it takes really 2 or 3 hours to completely paint a portrait, but, there's plenty of those in the videos.
Yeah, well, there's 6 or 7 at painttube.tv.
And I can keep refining around this until Eric gives me the hook. There's a little bit of a greener color right at the corner of the lips.
Oh, this is awesome.
And there's typically a lighter color where the flesh flattens out next to the corner of the mouth.
So if you guys are interested, Bill's got several videos that are really in depth. This is just a beginning sample, but he goes into a complete painting on many of his videos. And so there's several. I won't show them all right now again, but if you go to painttube.tv, there's over 700 instruction videos there, including all of Bill's. Been doing this for a while.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, I think we're going to wrap.
Okay, well, thank you. I hope that this was useful. And again, it's the 5 darks: eye socket, under the nose, under the upper lip, under the lower lip, and under the chin. And if that's your starting point, you'll create a 3-dimensional head, and then you can keep refining it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
All right. Bill is going to be part of Pastel Live. Pastel Live is coming up in September, the 18th through the 20th, and he's part of a forum with Harley Brown and some others. It's going to be really awesome. That's at pastellive.com. It's a 4-day event if you do all 4 days. So thanks again to Bill Schneider. I just want to tell you also we have something free for you. If we pull that up right now, we have a free gift for you. And that free gift would be about pastel painting. Can we pull that up? There it is. 45 pastel pointers from the pros. That's easy for me to say. Just go to pasteltoday.com/ebook. All right. And what else do we have? Oh, 𝗏𝗵𝗁 is coming up next Monday. We have a special live event. Kevin's going to show 5 steps to break free of creative ruts. And he's also going to reveal something he's doing now that is all new and he's very excited about. You can sign up at streamlineartevents.com/𝗏𝗵𝗁, 𝗏𝗵𝗁. Okay, I'm Eric Rhodes. Thanks for tuning in today. I tried to get my 5 darks in there. So Bill, I was paying attention. Thank you very much, you guys, for tuning in. Remember, you can learn to paint. Anybody can learn to paint. You don't have to have any special skills. You just need to take the time. If you take any 5 of our art instruction videos and watch them, chances are you're going to gain the confidence to know you can do this. And we have everything you can imagine, from drawing to painting and pastel and watercolor and oil and landscapes and portraits, etc. Pretty much everything just at Art School Live on YouTube. So go there. Make sure to hit the subscribe button when you're there. And that way we can notify you when we go live or when we have something new. And also, never hurts, kind of helps us. Thanks for tuning in today. Thank you again to Bill Schneider.